I'm Matt Rizzetta, and I'm joined by a very special guest today, Bryan Murphy. Bryan is the CEO of Breather, which is the leading provider of flexible private workspaces with hundreds of locations across the globe. N6A is also a very proud partner of Breather. Bryan, it's great to have a few minutes with you today. Hope everyone in the Breather family and the Murphy family is staying safe in these conditions.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Matt, for having me on. We're all hanging in there, doing the best we can.
All we can do. So, Bryan, today's chat's all about overcoming adversity in your career. And Bryan, you certainly know a thing or two about overcoming adversity. Obviously, you started your career as a young founder. You know, you've sold companies, you've sat on many advisory boards, you've been involved in companies that have disrupted many business categories. You've worked in leadership positions for large global enterprises, such as eBay. And now, obviously, you're the CEO of Breather during what is really an unprecedented time of adversity for the global economy. So why don't we start at the beginning, Bryan? You began your career as a young entrepreneur, which, you know, comes with all sorts of incredible adversity and strife. What was it like dealing with adversity back in the early days, and how did you manage to survive those early days back then?
Sure. You know, I think there's been a lot that's been written on this subject, but I will tell you, it really boils down to one thing. After all the years that I've been doing this, and that's to never give up. It sounds simple, but that is it. As an entrepreneur, as a founder, people look to you. You're the one that has to keep believing, to keep iterating, and keep trying. And what I've seen is that 80% of the time that a businesses fail, it's because the founder is the one that gave up.
Yeah, amen. We've had a hashtag at N6A since the pandemic started called "Keep Fighting," and that's kind of, that's it. You can't stop fighting, and especially at a startup level, the businesses and the culture really takes the personality of the founder. So it all starts and ends right there, right?
Yep, that's absolutely. It sounds really simple. It's easier to say than it is to do. But that is it.
So, Bryan, talk to us about those early days. I call them the survival days, back when you're first starting out in your basement as an entrepreneur. And it sounds so romantic, but in reality, it's very difficult. And everyone needs a good support system, I think, in some way to kind of help them overcome those survival days. Who were some of the people who helped you, or figures who helped you overcome adversity back in those early days?
Yeah, it's really remarkable. This question really threw me back, to thinking about my early days. I remember sitting at my kid's desk. I mean, it was like this cheap little desk when I launched my first business, and sitting there going, "Oh my gosh, what am I doing?" It's hilarious. It really boils down to, I would say that, the folks that have helped me, when I think back, my wife, my parents, my best friend and one of my first business partners, some key investors. There's so many people. And what it really made me think is that really the key to overcoming adversity is to have a strong network of people that believe in you. And it doesn't have to be big, but you really need that support network of people that believe in you. And I also believe this is why that most successful businesses that you hear about have co-founders. There's very few businesses that have just a single founder. And I think that's because you really do need that person next to you, sitting next to you in the trenches, to give you confidence when you're down, and vice versa. And I think sometimes it's just someone that you don't want to let down, that keeps pushing and moving you. And I think those are the keys: to have a strong network of people that believe in you, and I think it helps to have a co-founder.
It's so true. It's so true. I was talking to our staff about, at least, it reminds me of, my own experience. I always say the two most important people you can have in your career are somebody you want to make proud and somebody you want to prove wrong. And I think that that's kind of what you're saying, especially in the early days. To have someone next to you, and to have something that gives you purpose more than just yourself to make it and to survive is an incredibly motivational factor.
Yeah, I think sometimes having just a little chip on your shoulder, it can be a pretty powerful.
Nothing wrong with that. Healthy chip on your shoulder. Nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So, Bryan, let's talk about kind of the current environment, which obviously is unprecedented, as you said, in many respects. So you've run businesses through several global crises in the past, 9/11, the 2008 crash, SARS. How does the current crisis in your mind compare to those? And what would be your advice to help other entrepreneurs and business leaders persevere in times of adversity like we're going through right now?
Sure. So, all those other crises all seem monumental at the time, but they were all dry runs for this one. There's nothing that any of us that have seen that look like this. But I will say that they did help me develop a framework that I use today. And that framework is, number one, plan for the worst. And the key takeaway from that is, in a crisis, you've got to preserve cash. So work with your team, figure out what that worst case is, estimate the cost savings that you need to make it, and then double it. And that's a hard lesson for many entrepreneurs, because we're all very wired to be optimistic and growth mode and all of these things. So you really have to kind of shift gears as a leader to move from growth mode to survival mode. And it's a very different mindset. Once you have that, then act decisively. Number two is act decisively to stay ahead of the curve. Many people come up with a plan, but they say, let's just wait a little bit and see what happens. Best thing to do is just act decisively. One of the things that we did in this with this pandemic is, as soon as we saw the severity of it, which was that first week that we all started to get sent home, literally that first week, we did that estimation and we took action immediately in that week, well ahead of other companies. And I think, to the surprise of many, even to myself, it's like, once again, it's a hard thing to do. But the most important thing that you can do is act decisively and quickly to create that longer runway. It's almost exponential. And the number three thing you need to do is survive. The crisis will end at some point. I like to liken this as, we're flying across this chasm right now. We're in the clouds. We can't see the other side yet, but there is another side to it. Our jobs right now are to survive it, to preserve jobs, and be of service for our customers on the other side. Because particularly in our business, I do believe that disruptions like this lead to great changes on the other side. And I think the flexible office will be a product that's going to be significantly in demand once we get to the other side of this crisis.
Agreed. Bryan, I had two follow-ups because I love those 3 points. Two follow-ups. First, on your first point about cash preservation, how have you changed your processes as far as meeting with your direct reports, going through cash flow scenarios, pressure tests, all that sort of stuff in this environment versus, before we entered this COVID pandemic, so to speak? That's my first question. My second question is on your third point, which is about, I've been encouraging entrepreneurs now to, obviously you have to play defense first and protect your house in terms of preserving jobs, making sure that, you're protecting the business, you have a fiduciary responsibility to do that. But on the other hand, if you play your cards right and you play a little bit of offense, you can exit the pandemic in a really strong, healthy position, certainly healthier than you entered it. So how do you kind of balance that offense and defensive management in an environment like this?
Yeah, great question. So we really spent the first couple weeks. The first thing we did is we set up first thing is I'm very fortunate to have a really strong and experienced executive leadership team. So I didn't have to do a lot of a convincing or explanation to this team on how we should be managing this crisis. We all dove right into it immediately. We spent the first couple of weeks really creating that plan, assessing what the worst case solution was going to be, and what changes we needed to do to make in order to survive it. We executed very rapidly on that. We turned what was a weekly, executive leadership team meeting into a daily meeting. And so we do it, especially because we're working from home and because it's a crisis. We now meet for half an hour every day in a stand-up to review our plan and talk about whatever we need to make. And that's been a great process. In fact, it might even be one that we might even continue post-pandemic. I've also asked every leader in my company to do the same with their team. So every day they're doing at least a 15 to half an hour a stand up with their teams just to make sure they can run through the plan and understand what they need to do for the day and discuss address any trouble spots immediately before they blow up in something else. So that's first and foremost. Now what we've done, we're about, I guess 7 or 8 weeks into this thing. And for the past few weeks, we've actually been thinking about, okay, what do we need to do to prepare for getting to the other side? And that means 2 things. Number one is, okay, we need a plan in our particular business, which is providing flexible office space for companies. What changes do we need to make to our product, to our operations, to our equipment in order to make sure that our employees can come, or our customers can come back to a healthy and safe environment? Mm-hmm. So we've developed that plan, and we're getting ready to roll that out. Number one. Number 2 is, how can we? Who's going to need our services when we come back? What kind of company should we be talking to now to make sure that they're aware of our product and services when they start coming back? And we identified a group of companies that we know, and we've been talking to them, want our product and service when we come back. So we've actually turned our marketing and our sales team up to be reaching out and talking to those companies just to let them know, hey, listen, in the next 30, 60, 90 days, whatever it is, when you guys are thinking about coming back to work, we're going to be here for you, and this is what we've got to offer. And most have been very appreciative actually of that. So it seems a little contra, it seems a little, at first when I was talking to the team, they're like, gosh, there's a pandemic going on. Is it a little early to be talking to all of our customers, doing this outreach like this? And I'm like, no, companies, their leases are expiring. They're thinking about coming back to work. They need to know that we've got a solution for them.
Absolutely. Bryan, I want to ask you about, just while we're on the topic of customers, let's stay there for 1 second. I was just curious to get your thoughts on how are you coaching employees in this environment to work with customers, knowing that so many of your customers have been impacted in some way by COVID, some of them physically, some of through their family members, some of them through their businesses. It's just such a, time of incredible stress and adversity for your customers. How have you been coaching your employees to work with them in terms of how they're communicating to them, how they're being of service to them in this environment, knowing they're under so much pressure?
Sure. I think the word that I could use to describe it is empathy. Have empathy. So I've been coaching the team and working with them. Listen, we've got to treat our customers like partners, and put yourself in their shoes and understand where they're coming from. So that means that we're working with all our customers to make sure that we can accommodate what they need, and they also understand what we need too. It's a partnership, because it only works if we both survive in the end. Agreed.
And Bryan, on that note, one thing that you've rolled out at Breather that I know we've been super proud of, I know you are as well, and your customers and employees too, is this Give Back program. Can you just talk to us a little bit about how that came about and what it's all about?
Sure. Like so many other companies, part of Breather's DNA is to support our community. We've got a great team of people who very much care about the communities that they live and work in. And so like General Motors can make ventilators. What do we have to offer? Well, we've got spaces to offer. So what we've done is we've made those spaces available to companies that are responding to the crisis. And we made those available free of charge. The only thing they have to do is pay for cleaning. And we're working to get that message out. It's the thing that we can do to help first responders and companies that are working to get food to people and working to get medical devices, et cetera, et cetera.
Where can anyone listening to this or watching this, where can they learn more about the Give Back program?
They can come right to breather.com, and we've got information available for them there.
Awesome. I can't let you leave until I get your point of view on the future of workspace, since you obviously, you're in the throes of this right now. What's your perspective on if and how the future of the workspace will change after COVID once we make it out of this?
Well, it's an interesting problem, and I was talking with a number of other folks in the industry about this. And what you want to do is there's a long and a short term here, okay, that we have to be mindful of. The short term consists of everything that I'll call that's within the COVID window, right? So right now we're all working from home, but we're going to be going back to work, and we're going to be living with COVID for many, many months, maybe at least the next 18 months or so, until the point at which we have either a vaccine or we have herd immunity, one of the two, right? So that means that in the short term, we have to be making architectural, equipment, and operational changes to promote social distancing and create healthy environments for our customers, right? But longer term, once we have those things, you got to be careful that you don't make too many changes, very expensive changes, that give you this amazing COVID protected office in 5 years that no one's going to want.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because it is building. You're building buildings. You're building offices. They have long time frames, and they're very expensive to do. So we're working to balance those two things. I do think, though, that longer term, I think we'll see the pendulum begin to swing back on density. It used to be 250 square feet per head back 10, 15 years ago. In a co-working facility, that's down to 55 or 50 feet, which is a little ridiculous, okay?
Wow.
I do think that we'll swing back from density. Even if you look at the breather spaces today, we average about 105, 110 square feet per head, which compared to co-working is pretty generous. So I do think you'll see that, and obviously co-working is going to take more precedence, so having more flexibility baked into the operations is going to be essential. But short term, things that we can do to enhance social distancing, whether that's staggered seating, signage, etc., making changes to have protective barriers up between the desks, adding more hand sanitizer stations, and very importantly, updating our cleaning and disinfecting protocols, which we've already done to help to make the workplaces safe and healthy.
So, Bryan, last question for you. Breather works with so many different types of businesses, from startups to enterprises, from local companies to companies that have a global footprint, companies from so many different types of industry. My question is just, how are you managing to communicate with your customers, knowing that they're so different? One is so different from another, and you can't really follow a one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting point. What we found is that regardless of the business, it all turns out they have very similar needs when it comes to office space. Number one, our customers are looking for a space with flexible terms that maximizes productivity, is private, and is attractive and comfortable for their employees. Now we're developing solutions for them to get back to work as soon as possible, or as soon as they're ready to get back to work, and as safely as possible. And once again, that means social distancing, making sure that the workstations are spaced appropriately and have protective shields where appropriate. Specialized equipment, so a lot of customers are asking for enhanced audiovisual equipment, so they can do more social distancing that way, and obviously and importantly, enhanced cleaning and disinfecting protocols. Those are the things that we're focused on. In fact, we've got another survey that's going out this afternoon to our customers to ask them, hey, what are the things that you're looking for when you come back to work, so that we can make sure, and this is once again another thing that we do, it's really important for us to communicate with our customers to understand what it is that they feel like they need in order to come back to work safely.
Got it. Great stuff. Bryan, obviously we appreciate the relationship, the partnership. I'm super proud to be on the Breather team. I wish you guys all the best. And, just for everyone who's watching this, please go to breather.com, support the company. The company's doing great things, not just for their customers, but also for the community, helping us all get through what's, very stressful time for the global business climate.
Well, thanks, Matt. I appreciate the support that you and N6A have given us during this time. And we're all looking forward to getting back to work as usual.